I think the cognitive revolution is like the new idea, right? So a lot of people have like ways of explaining this. I think Chomsky has this like the language gene, right? The cognitive revolution is the first thing that allowed us to band together and like communicate and express ideas, right? So his key idea that I find really, really interesting there is that, see, language in and of itself is not that unique, right? All sorts of animals, apes do it, dolphins do it. But all their language is about things that exist within reality. There's a river over there and a pride of lions hanging out. Our language is kind of weird because we have the ability to express things about things that don't exist anywhere but our imaginations.
Yeah.
And he's got this really powerful sentence right there. It's like, I do not dispute that the UN should impose sanctions on Libya for violation of human rights. My only observation is that the UN, Libya, and human rights do not exist anywhere but in our heads. There is no thing that you can point to in the world that is like, oh, here's a human right. Like, no, like it comes out of this.
The things we agreed upon.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
The reality.
The imaginary things we agreed on.
It's a beautiful, it's a really powerful concept when you think about it, right? Because then you ask yourself, like, okay, how many things in my world are constructed versus real? And like, literally everything is constructed. Like, you realize like there's very few, and it's not like a good or bad or scary or it's just, that's why we've been able to do a lot of this, right? That's why we have been successful at domesticating animals way back when, building atom bombs now, and you know, everything in between.
And it's crazy too. We're just like in the middle of this beer garden,
right? Yeah.
And you're an immigrant from Dubai, right?
Yep.
And it's like, and then I'm just a country boy from Wisconsin, and here we
are. Yeah, exactly. Right?
How does that happen?
How does that happen? No,
and it's because of all these things that took thousands of years.
Yeah, and lots of suffering, and which he definitely
points out. Yeah.
Definitely points out. Oh, and that in that cognitive revolution chapter too, I think like on this suffering topic, the biggest secret of our species, right? The original genocide was we were not the only species of Homo. Yeah. Now we are. And why? And you know, generally, like, okay, there's multiple theories of this. And then what he'll do is in the book is he'll evaluate each one and like debunk them. It's actually pretty funny, actually, the way he'll approach it, because a lot of them like stem from this understanding that humanity is like the pinnacle, right? And like we were designed to be this way because we're perfect this way. That's not the case, right? Your first thing is to take a step back and like everything being an accident. It was a very, like the Neanderthals left the homeland first and settled in like, I think it's Eastern Europe now, where it was way colder back then because Earth was in the middle of an ice age. About like 10,000, 30,000 years later, another band of a different species of Homo, Sapiens, had left. And with our like new languages and cultures and better ways of motivating groups of people to do things, it was no match for the Neanderthal. Like, you would have lost a one-on-one with this person. This person was really, and they weren't like, their brains were bigger, right? Like, they were definitely capable of doing other things. It was just that, like, the Sapiens cognitive revolution enabled them to, like, just wipe out every other species of Homo. I think he'll call it, like, we weren't, like, so because in biology, it's called a family, right? Like, it's family, genus, and then species. Okay. So we think of ourselves as the only person in that family. We had brothers and sisters. We just killed them.
So what does he say in the book? Because I don't remember specifically.
Right? He says that there are these, there are like archaeological evidences that you can find of like the presence of like certain types of fossils up to 30,000 years, which is when we think sapiens entered that land, and then like no other remain can be found. Now DNA tests do prove some cool stuff though, right? Is that like people have Neanderthal in them and people have Erectus in them, right? I think like populations of Europe have like, well, it's a small percent. So there was definitely some intermingling. You know, I don't think that we killed everyone and anything in sight. You know, maybe there was some kind of cooperation. A lot of this you don't know, right? Like, because the present evidence is just, it's like one bone, right, that you see, and you're like, okay, what, like, how can you, any inference you make out of this has to be extrapolated at some level. But, like, an increasing amount of the evidence suggests that generally when we came, we wiped everything out. This is true of animals, too. When we entered the continent of Australia, that's like a phenomenal paragraph.
We go to Australia, megafauna.
Yeah.
Done. America's done.
Right. The chapter on Australia is also like beautiful because marsupials like just had like Americas and Australia has never even had like these bipedal apes like ever, right? So at least in the savannas, the other creatures didn't have time to evolve natural defenses against apes because we were faster than evolution, and I'll get to that in just a second. But they knew to avoid humans, right? Even lions were like, we don't really want to hang out with this because they know how to like fire and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The like giant, I think it's called the dipedron, or the like even giant kangaroos and koalas. Imagine that, right? You're this like massive 150-ton creature. You see this like random 2-footed ape, scrawny, like just walking around. You give it a second thought, right? You just like, what? Like, who gives a shit? But then we just went there and we like burnt everything, right?
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
The ancient ape. Scary, right?
Yeah. Oh man. So okay, talk about so part one. We have the cognitive revolution.
Yeah.
We touched on some things there. So what happens until we get to the agricultural revolution?
So okay, we see. Okay, so he'll ask a lot of questions about like society, culture. What like okay, it's one thing to look at this evidence and stuff like that, and make inferences about what we did to the world. But what about ourselves? Like, how did we live? Did we have gods? Did we have rituals? Did we do sacrifices? Like, what kind of stuff did we do? Right? Again, we don't know. Evidence that we have is hazy at best. Plus, like, I think making like a causal inference on some of this stuff is pretty hard. Like, you can definitely make an assumption but like deterministically saying this is how we live is impossible with the current evidence that we have. But that said, like there is evidence that suggests we have like some sort of cultures. There are like these Stonehenge-like structures that were found in Turkey that they've dated
Golapaki.
We can open the book if we want.
Sometimes I go down these like YouTube rabbit holes of like ancient ruins, and it just blows my mind. Bunch in like India, these like temples.
Temples with with very intricate carvings, right? And it's like. Yeah, so with cognitive revolution, like society, how was it structured? Mostly hunter-forager. We didn't actually do that much hunting, we were more foragers. Okay. We had a very strong connection with the natural world because we had to, right? You had to be able to look at a berry and tell whether it would kill you or like be, sweet, right? Yeah. You had to be able to smell a mushroom and again be able to determine whether it would kill you or... So we had like a very good connection with the natural world. We knew about our surroundings.
So I bet our senses were a lot stronger.
Our geographies. Right? Well, I don't think they've become weaker.
They're just clouded. Probably,
well, I think that our senses now are actually a result of that. Like right now, you're living in an urban jungle, but your brain thinks you're in the savannah. And so okay, I moved to Chicago. I understood the geography pretty well because I know how to I have this instincts, right, of knowing geography, and we all have that sense to figure out where is what and discover and be good and have our internal compass calibrated, right? We all have this impulse. A lot of it might come from that, right, where we had to know the lay of the land so extensively, and that has just been coded into our behaviors. Now, while our geography has changed, DNA and biology doesn't evolve at the pace at which we do. Yeah. Which is the second interesting thing about that cognitive revolution bit, right? So he calls this, at the cognitive revolution, history became separate from biology. Up until that point, history was biology. Evolution determined what we did as a species. We had no control over anything else, right? If there was a big-ass ice age, it was a big-ass ice age. And
so you mean we didn't have any control over our environment?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
We were completely dependent on it.
Yeah.
And in so much as we could the whole making up our own stories and our own cultures and stuff like that, that would only be dependent on what the environment did, right? If there was an ice age, there would be an ice god. If there was a global warming age, there would have been a fire god or something like that, right? It was completely dependent on biology.
Yeah.
From the cognitive revolution, when we could start making up these myths and start making up these figures and deities and stuff like that, history became separate from biology. It's an interesting concept, right?
It's a very interesting concept.
You don't think about a lot of the stuff that he suggests in this book, which is why I like it. So.